The transmission came through at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, and I knew immediately it was wrong because nobody uses S-band frequency anymore, especially not with modulation patterns from before I was born. I was alone in the control room at Goldstone, third shift, surrounded by the hum of equipment that tracked spacecraft millions of miles away. The Mojave Desert stretched dark and empty outside the reinforced windows. My coffee had gone cold an hour ago. I'd been half asleep, monitoring routine telemetry from the Perseverance rover, when every screen in the room suddenly synced to the same incoming signal. Not an error, not interference. A voice. Mission Control, this is Mariner 7, do you copy? Mission Control, this is Mariner 7. Static swallowed the rest, but underneath it I could hear something else. Breathing. Ragged, desperate breathing. I checked the source coordinates 3 times. Mars. The signal was definitely coming from Mars, from the Valles Marineris region specifically, using a transmission protocol that NASA had retired in 1971. Mariner 7 was the name of a flyby probe, not a manned mission. We'd never sent humans to Mars. Not in 1971. Not ever. Please, oh Christ, please respond. They're still here. The graves are still here. I can see mine dated 2027 now. There's a fresh one. How is there a fresh one? We've been here for... The voice cut out. The signal strength dropped to nothing. I sat there with my hand frozen over the recording interface, my skin prickling with something that definitely wasn't the recycled air conditioning. The screens had already reset to their normal displays, tracking satellites and probes whose exact locations we could verify. I should have called my supervisor, should have filed an incident report, should have followed every protocol in the book. Instead, I isolated the recording and played it back, slowing it down, filtering out the static. The voice was male, American accent, older. Under the panic, there was something else. Exhaustion so profound it sounded like grief. When I cleaned up the audio, I could hear him clearly. Mission Control, this is Commander William Herschel, Mariner 7, requesting immediate extraction. We've been stranded for... I don't know anymore. The calendar says it's been 62 years, but that's impossible. We only landed. William Herschel. I sat back in my chair. The name triggered something in my memory, something my father had mentioned once before he died 6 months ago. Something about the 60s, something about Mars, something he'd made me promise never to dig into. I pulled up the archived mission logs, typing in search parameters that probably flagged me in 3 different security databases. Mariner 7, 1963, Herschel. Every result came back classified, all of them. That's when I knew my father had been lying to me for 34 years. The classified files were useless. Every document from 1963 with Herschel's name had been redacted so heavily they looked like someone had taken a marker to blank paper. Mission objectives, blacked out. Crew manifest, blacked out. Launch coordinates, trajectory calculations, landing site. Everything that mattered was gone. But they'd missed something. They always do. Buried in a footnote of a budget report from October 1963, someone had included an equipment requisition for extended life support systems, 3-man crew, 180-day surface operation capability. The Mars rovers we'd sent could barely last 90 sols. This was something else entirely, something they'd planned to keep on the surface for 6 months. I leaned back from my terminal, the blue glow washing over my face. Outside, dawn was still 2 hours away. The desert was a black void beyond the complex, the kind of darkness that made you feel small. My father had worked here too, back in the 80s and 90s. Same shift, same chair probably. How many times had he sat here knowing what I was just starting to piece together? The transmission had come from Valles Marineris. I pulled up topographical maps, orbital imagery from the last 15 years of Mars missions. The canyon system was 4,000 kilometers long, 7 kilometers deep in places. We'd mapped every meter of it. If there was a burial site down there, we would have seen it, unless someone made damn sure we never looked. I downloaded the transmission to an encrypted drive and erased it from the main server. My hands were shaking. This was career suicide, maybe actual criminal charges, but I couldn't stop. The voice on that recording, Commander Herschel, had sounded terrified in a way I'd never heard before. Not the fear of dying, the fear of realizing you've already died and somehow you're still here to know it. My phone buzzed, text from my supervisor. "Why are you running archive searches at 3 a.m? Damn it. The security flags had been faster than I thought. I typed back, "Couldn't sleep. Reviewing old mission protocols for training refresh." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Come see me when shift ends." I was screwed. But I had 4 more hours. My father's office had been in Building 7, the old administration wing they'd mostly converted to storage after the budget cuts in 2009. I'd cleaned it out after he died, boxed up 30 years of paperwork and coffee-stained notebooks. Most of it was still in my garage in Barstow, 40 minutes north, but he'd kept a second desk here, the one he'd never let me see. I grabbed my access card and headed outside. Goldstone sprawled across the desert floor, a collection of buildings and dish arrays that looked almost sinister in the pre-dawn darkness. The big 70-meter antenna loomed behind me, pointed at some distant satellite. Building 7's lock should have rejected my card. It didn't. Someone had updated my clearance without telling me. The hallways smelled like dust and old paint. Most of the offices had been stripped bare, desks and filing cabinets removed years ago. My father's had been third on the left. The door was closed but not locked. Inside, everything was exactly as he'd left it. The desk, the chair, the filing cabinet in the corner, a poster of the Apollo 11 landing on the wall, edges curled with age. His coffee mug still sitting on the windowsill, the one that said, "I need my space." It should have made me smile. Instead, my chest felt tight. I opened the filing cabinet. Empty except for one folder, cream-coloured and brittle, sitting in the bottom drawer like it had been waiting. No label. I pulled it out and sat in my father's chair. Inside were photographs, black and white, grainy, the kind they took in the 60s before digital imaging. 3 men in bulky spacesuits, helmet visors up, standing in front of a rocket I didn't recognize. The caption on the back, Mariner 7 crew, October 1963, L.R. Merrick Ashford Herschel. They looked young, maybe 30. Herschel had a narrow face, sharp cheekbones, the kind of focused intensity you saw in test pilots. Ashford was stockier, smiling despite the weight of the suit. Merrick stood slightly apart, his expression unreadable. The second photo showed a launch. Night launch, flames erupting from the pad, a rocket climbing into darkness. Someone had written on the back, November 7th, 1963, God forgive us. 5 days before Kennedy was shot. The whole world had been watching Dallas. Nobody had been watching the Cape. It showed a surface, rocky, rust-coloured, unmistakably Martian. In the foreground, 3 rectangular shapes jutted from the ground. Headstones. Even in the grainy resolution, I could see they were carved from stone. Behind them, a lander module sat at an angle, legs dug into the regolith. Someone had drawn a circle around one of the headstones in red ink. Written beside it, this one had my name. My father's handwriting. I dropped the photo. It fluttered to the desk, landing face up, those 3 stones staring at me. My father had never been to Mars. He'd been a communications technician, same as me. Earthbound his entire career, so why the hell did he have a photo showing his own grave on another planet? My phone buzzed again, another text from my supervisor. "Tom, we need to talk, now." But underneath it, a second message from a number I didn't recognize. "Stop looking. Your father knew when to quit. Be smarter than him." I left Building 7 through the back exit, the folder of photos tucked inside my jacket. The threatening text had come from a blocked number, but the timing was too perfect. Someone was watching the system, monitoring every search query, every file I accessed. Maybe watching me right now through the security cameras mounted on every building. The parking lot was empty except for my truck and 2 other vehicles. My supervisor's sedan and an old Ford I didn't recognize, covered in road dust like it had driven through half the desert to get here. I kept my head down and walked fast. My phone rang before I reached my truck, not my supervisor this time. The blocked number. I almost didn't answer, but whoever was calling already knew where I was, what I'd found. Ignoring them wouldn't make this go away. Yeah, Thomas Dalton. The voice was male, older, with the kind of roughness that came from decades of cigarettes or desert air, or both. You look like your father. Same stupid determination to go digging where you shouldn't. I stopped walking. Who is this? Someone who tried to warn him 30 years ago. He didn't listen either. A pause. The sound of breathing. You found the photos. You saw the graves. Now you're wondering how a man who never left Earth could have his name on a headstone on Mars. If you're trying to scare me, I'm trying to keep you alive, kid. Your father, he got close to understanding what really happened in '63. Started asking questions, pulling records, making phone calls to people who'd retired or disappeared. Then one day he just stopped. Came back to work like nothing had happened. Never mentioned Mars again. You know why? I didn't answer. My hand was tight around the phone. Because they showed him what happens when you keep digging. They showed him the pattern. What pattern? The line went quiet for so long I thought he'd hung up. Then, meet me at the old radio telescope site, the one off Highway 247, 30 minutes. Come alone or don't come at all. He disconnected. I stood in the parking lot with dawn starting to grey the eastern horizon, trying to decide if I was about to walk into something that would get me killed. The smart move was to go home, delete everything, pretend I'd never heard that transmission. My father had made that choice. He'd lived another 26 years after he stopped looking, but he died knowing he was a coward. I'd seen it in his eyes those last few months, the weight of whatever secret he'd been carrying. I got in my truck and drove north. The old radio telescope had been decommissioned in the 90s, a victim of budget cuts and newer technology. It sat 20 miles from the main complex, accessible only by a dirt road that snaked through creosote bushes and Joshua trees. I'd been here once as a kid when my father brought me to work. The dish had seemed enormous then, a metal giant reaching for the sky. Now it was just rust and neglect, listing slightly to one side like it might collapse any day. The dusty Ford from the parking lot was already there. I parked beside it and got out. The desert morning was cold and perfectly silent except for the wind. No birds, no traffic noise, just emptiness in every direction. You came, the voice from the phone. An old man emerged from behind the telescope base, thin and weathered, wearing a jacket too heavy for the temperature. His face was all angles and deep wrinkles, eyes sharp despite his age. That's either brave or stupid. Your father couldn't decide which one he was. You knew him. Worked with him for 15 years, Jack Brennan. I was senior operations director when your dad was just starting out. He studied me for a moment, then nodded toward the telescope. Come on, we shouldn't talk in the open. I followed him into the shadow of the dish. Up close, the structure looked even more decrepit, covered in graffiti and bird droppings, the metal framework groaning in the wind. Brennan pulled out a cigarette, lit it with shaking hands. November 7th, 1963. That's when it started. You've seen the photos, so you know it happened. They launched 3 men to Mars on a rocket the public never knew existed. Herschel, Ashford, Merrick. Good men. The best we had. Why was it classified? Because of what they found when they landed. He took a long drag, exhaled smoke that the wind scattered. First transmission came back on schedule. Touchdown successful. All systems operational. Beginning surface exploration. Then nothing for 18 hours. Mission Control was ready to declare them lost when Herschel finally radioed back. He was crying. Grown man, test pilot, Korean War veteran, crying so hard he could barely speak. I waited. The folder of photos felt heavy inside my jacket. They'd found graves. 3 of them carved from Martian rock, arranged in a perfect row. Each stone had a name. Their names: Herschel, Ashford, Merrick. Death dates showing November 1962, exactly 1 year before they'd landed. That's impossible. That's what Mission Control said. Told them it was a psychological reaction, ordered them to return to the lander. But Herschel, he couldn't let it go. He excavated one of the graves. His own grave. Brennan's hand was shaking worse now. Found a body inside, wearing a suit identical to his, same patches, same serial numbers. Ran a field DNA test, perfect match. He was looking at his own corpse, dead for a year, on a planet he'd just reached for the first time. My mouth was dry. What did they do? Panicked, called Mission Control, described everything. The body showed signs of starvation, dehydration, like he'd been alive for weeks after landing, slowly dying. They found a journal with the body. It described a mission, landing on Mars in 1962, finding graves from 1961, digging them up, finding themselves, over and over, an infinite regression. You're saying it's a time loop. I'm saying it's worse than that. Brennan dropped his cigarette, crushed it under his boot. Because when they looked around, they found more graves. Hundreds of them scattered across the canyon floor. Different dates, 1961, 1960, 1959, going back decades. And future dates too, 1964, 1965, 1970. The furthest one Herschel could reach was dated 2847. Every grave contained the same 3 men. Every body showed the same cause of death. The wind picked up, whistling through the telescope framework. I felt sick. Mission Control ordered immediate evacuation. The crew rushed back to the lander, began launch prep. But here's the thing nobody could explain. The lander was damaged. Fuel line ruptured, oxidizer contaminated. Damage that hadn't been there an hour before. Damage that made launch impossible. They were stranded. They're still stranded. Brennan looked at me with eyes that had seen something they couldn't forget. That transmission you picked up last night? That was Herschel. Real time. He's been on Mars for 62 years, Thomas. Not aging, not dying, just existing in some kind of loop that keeps resetting. And every time it resets, more graves appear, more versions of himself and his crew, all of them trapped, all of them slowly figuring out there's no escape. I pulled out the folder, showed him the photo with my father's handwriting. Why did my dad have this? Why did he write that one of the graves had his name? Brennan's expression shifted, something like pity crossing his face. Because the graves don't just have Herschel's crew. They started finding others, names of people who worked on the mission, engineers, technicians, directors, future graves dated years ahead. Your father found his own in 1994. Death date showed 2019, 6 months ago. My father had died in March 2019, heart attack in his sleep. He saw when he was going to die, I whispered. Worse. He saw where? Mars. A grave on Mars, 70 million kilometers from home, dated 6 months ago. That's when he stopped looking. Brennan's voice dropped. Now ask yourself why they sent you that transmission. Why, after 60 years of silence, they broke through last night specifically. I didn't want to ask, but I had to. Why? Because you're supposed to find out. Because you're part of the pattern now. He reached into his jacket and pulled out another photograph, this one in color. Recent. It showed the Martian surface, a fresh grave marker, stone carved with precise letters. My name, Thomas Dalton. Death date, November 9th, 2025. Tomorrow. I stared at the photograph until the letters of my name stopped making sense. Just shapes carved into alien rock, meaningless and absolutely terrifying at the same time. Where did you get this? My voice came out wrong, too high. NASA took it 3 weeks ago, Perseverance rover, routine canyon survey. Someone in imaging noticed it, flagged it up the chain. By morning, the file was classified and the technician who found it was reassigned to Alaska. Brennan tucked the photo back into his jacket. They've been monitoring you since your father died, waiting to see if you'd start looking. That transmission last night wasn't an accident, Thomas. They wanted you to hear it. Who's they? People who've been managing this situation for 60 years. People who understand that some doors, once opened, can't be closed. He started walking back toward his truck. Go home. Forget everything. You've still got time to avoid whatever happens tomorrow. You're just going to leave. I followed him, anger replacing the fear. You show me my own grave and tell me I'm going to die tomorrow, and then what? Wish me luck. What do you want me to do? I'm 83 years old, kid. I watched this program destroy better men than me. Your father was smart enough to walk away. Be smart like him. My father died anyway, same date as his grave. Brennan stopped at his truck door. For a moment, he just stood there, hand on the handle, shoulders slumped. Yeah, he did. And maybe that's the kindest version of this story. Quick, painless. At home in his own bed instead of starving on Mars, digging up his own corpse over and over for eternity. He opened the door, paused. They'll come for you soon. Offer you a choice. Take it or don't. But understand that either way, you're already in the pattern. You've been in it since the moment your father first looked at those photos in 1994. He drove away, leaving me standing in the shadow of a dead telescope, with the desert wind picking up sand and the sun finally breaking the horizon. I drove back to Goldstone, my hands numb on the wheel. The photograph was burned into my mind. My name, tomorrow's date. 70 million kilometers away, my grave already existed. Someone had carved it, or something. Or maybe it had always been there, waiting for me to become inevitable. The security gate guard waved me through without looking up. Normal Tuesday morning. Workers arriving for day shift, lights coming on in the buildings. The 70-meter dish slowly tracking across the sky toward whatever satellite needed its attention. I should have gone home. Instead, I went to my supervisor's office. Martin Cross had been at Goldstone for 12 years, a former Air Force communications officer who still kept his hair military short and his desk frighteningly organized. He was sitting behind his computer when I knocked, reading something that made his jaw tight. "Tom, close the door." I did. The office was small, walls covered with mission patches and commendation certificates. A photo of him shaking hands with an astronaut I didn't recognize. Everything proper and official and completely normal, except for the way he was looking at me. "I've been reviewing your activity logs from last night," he said quietly. "The unauthorized archive searches, the equipment requisition you pulled from 1963, the download you made from the main server at 3:47 a.m. before you deleted it." He folded his hands on the desk. "Want to tell me what you're doing?" I picked up a transmission. Old frequency, old protocol. I was trying to identify the source. By accessing classified mission files from 60 years ago. The signal originated from Mars. I needed to know if there is no signal from Mars. His voice was flat. There are no active transmissions using S-band frequency, no unauthorized communications, nothing that would explain why you decided to commit multiple security violations in a single shift. He opened a desk drawer, pulled out a folder. My file. "Your father worked here for 30 years. Excellent record, never a single violation. Then in 1994, he suddenly started accessing restricted files, just like you. Pulled the same mission data, the same budget reports, the same photographs." My chest went tight. "You knew?" "We all knew." He stopped before it became a real problem. Came in one morning and told me he'd made a mistake, that he was done digging into old history. Martin's expression softened slightly. "I liked your dad, Tom. We played poker together, went fishing a few times. When he died, I told myself I'd watch out for you. Make sure you didn't follow the same path. There were 3 men on Mars in 1963, they're still there. They found graves with their names, and now there's one with mine, dated tomorrow." The words came out before I could stop them. Martin's face went carefully blank. "You need to take some time off," he said slowly. "Paid leave, effective immediately. Grief does strange things. Your father died 6 months ago, you're working night shift alone, picking up noise on old frequencies. It's understandable that... I saw the photos. The launch, the crew, the graves. My father left them for me. Tom." He stood up, came around the desk. "Listen to me very carefully. There was no manned Mars mission in 1963. We didn't have the technology, the funding, or the capability. Mariner 7 was an unmanned flyby probe. Whatever you think you saw, then why is it classified? Why did my father stop looking? Why the hell is there a grave on Mars with my name on it? I realized I was shouting. Martin was looking at me with something between pity and fear, and I understood suddenly that he knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to understand that some truths weren't worth finding. Go home, he said quietly. Take a week. Rest. We'll talk when you're thinking clearly. I left his office feeling like I'd just lost something important, though I couldn't name what. The hallway was full of morning workers, people heading to their stations, chatting about weekend plans and equipment maintenance. Normal life, normal reality. I felt disconnected from all of it, like I was watching through glass. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Parking lot. White van. 5 minutes. I almost ignored it, but I was already damned, already in the pattern, already too far gone to pretend I could walk away now. The white van was parked in the far corner, windows tinted dark. I approached it like approaching a loaded gun, every instinct screaming at me to run. The side door slid open before I reached it. "Get in, Mr. Dalton." The voice from inside was young, professional, completely devoid of emotion. I got in. 2 men in dark suits sat on the bench seats, the kind of generic government operators you'd see in bad movies, except these were real, and they were looking at me like I was a problem to be solved. The van smelled like coffee and new leather. "We need to discuss your situation," the first one said. He had pale eyes and a face that probably smiled at company picnics. "You've discovered information about a classified program. That puts us in a difficult position." "The graves," I said. "Yes, the graves." He pulled out a tablet, tapped it a few times. "You've shown considerable initiative in your research. Your father had the same quality. He was offered a choice in 1994, and he made the wise decision. We're prepared to offer you the same." "What choice?" The second man spoke for the first time, his voice rougher. "Stop asking questions. Accept a generous severance package and relocate to any city of your choosing with a guaranteed position in a related field. You'll sign an NDA with enforcement penalties that include federal prison. In exchange, you get to live your life." November 9th comes and goes. You wake up on the 10th. You die of old age surrounded by grandkids who never know their grandfather almost went to Mars. "And if I don't stop?" The first man's smile was worse than no expression at all. "Then you'll understand exactly why your father made the choice he did. Because we'll show you the same thing we showed him." He turned the tablet toward me. The screen showed a video feed, security camera footage from somewhere with fluorescent lighting and concrete walls. A man sat at a metal table, head in his hands. It took me a moment to recognize him. My father. Younger, maybe 40, still had color in his hair. He looked destroyed. "This is from September 1994, the first man said. 2 weeks after he started investigating the Mariner 7 program. We brought him to a facility in Nevada, showed him something that changed his mind about continuing his research. The video had no audio, but I watched my father's shoulders shake, watched him wipe at his face. Then someone off camera handed him something, a photograph. My father looked at it, and his entire body went rigid. He stood up so fast the chair fell over, backing away from the table like the photo was radioactive. The video cut to a different angle. Now I could see what they'd shown him. It was a photograph of a Martian burial site, hundreds of graves. But in the foreground, someone had arranged 3 photos on the ground. I couldn't make out the details, but I saw my father drop to his knees in the video, saw him start to scream soundlessly. The tablet went dark. "We showed your father 3 things," the first man said quietly. His own grave, dated 2019. His wife's grave, dated 2003. And his son's grave, you, dated November 9th, 2025. My mother had died in 2003. Car accident, black ice, gone before the ambulance arrived. I'd been 9 years old. 21 years later, the man continued, we showed him the same graves. The dates hadn't changed. Your mother still had 6 years. You still had 28. He chose to stop looking, chose to have those extra years with you, and when 2019 came, he died exactly when his grave said he would. Heart attack, peaceful, at home. But my mother, she died in 2003. Car accident. Exactly as predicted. He leaned forward. Your father couldn't save her, Mr. Dalton, but he could save you. He spent 25 years making sure you never looked into the Mars program, never developed an interest in classified missions, never followed his path. And yet here you are anyway, 3 days before your date. So we're offering you what we offered him, a way out. Take it. The van door slid open. Desert air rushed in, hot despite the morning chill. You have until midnight, the second man said. After that, you're committed to the pattern, and the pattern doesn't let go. I stumbled out of the van. It drove away before I could respond, leaving me standing in the parking lot with my heart trying to break through my ribs. Every instinct told me to take the deal, sign the papers, take the money, disappear into a normal life. But my father had taken that deal and died anyway, on the exact date they'd shown him, and my mother, dead years before her time, her grave already waiting on Mars. The pattern didn't let go. That's what the man had said, which meant refusing the deal wouldn't make any difference. I was already caught. The only question was whether I'd die knowing what I was dying for. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number Brennan had called from. He answered on the first ring. You didn't take the deal. Tell me how to find them, I said. The astronauts. Tell me how to reach Mars. Brennan's house was 40 minutes east of Barstow, a single-story ranch that looked like it had been fighting the desert for decades and losing. Peeling paint, dead lawn, windows covered in dust so thick they barely let light through. A satellite dish pointed at the sky, jury-rigged with equipment that looked military surplus. He met me at the door with a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. Figured you'd call, he said, leading me inside. The interior was worse than the exterior. Papers everywhere, old computer equipment stacked in corners, maps tacked to every wall. Maps of Mars, Valles Marineris from every angle, marked with coordinates and dates. Sit, drink, then I'll tell you why you just made the biggest mistake of your life. I sat, the whiskey burned going down, which felt appropriate. There's no physical way to Mars, Brennan said, settling into a chair that had seen better decades. Not for you, not in the next 24 hours. Fastest mission we've ever planned would take 7 months. You'd be dead before you cleared Earth orbit, assuming your heart doesn't give out first, exactly like your father's did. Then what's the point? The point is understanding what you're actually dealing with. Because it's not a time loop. That's what they want you to think, what they've been calling it internally since 1963. But loops close, loops repeat. This is something else. He pulled a laptop from beneath a stack of papers, opened it to show a diagram I didn't understand at first. Circles within circles, branching timelines, all converging on a single point. It's a pattern. A self-reinforcing temporal structure that maintains stability by ensuring certain events happen exactly when they're supposed to. Your mother's car accident, your father's heart attack, the graves on Mars. They're not predictions, Tom. They're anchors, fixed points that the pattern needs to exist. Every time someone sees their grave date, they become locked into dying on that date. The pattern makes sure of it. Probability collapses, quantum certainty. Whatever you want to call it, the result is the same. You can't fight fate once you've seen your own death. I thought about my mother sliding on black ice, the semi-truck that couldn't stop in time. Random accident. Bad luck. It wasn't random, Brennan said, reading my face. Nothing about this is random. The pattern identified her as necessary for your father's compliance, showed him her grave to motivate him, then made sure she died exactly when it said she would. That's insane. Is it? Your father saw his date, 2019. 25 years to wait, knowing the exact day he'd die. You think he didn't try everything? Doctors, specialists, changed his diet, started exercising, quit smoking, I watched him become the healthiest 60-year-old I'd ever seen. March 7th, 2019. He went to bed with a clean bill of health. Brennan finished his whiskey in one swallow. Died in his sleep. Heart attack. No warning. Perfect health and then gone, because that's what his grave said. My hands were shaking. I poured another drink. The pattern doesn't just predict. It enforces. And it's been enforcing for a long time. Those graves on Mars don't just go back to 1963. Herschel found stones dated to the 1800s. Before spaceflight, before radio, before we could have possibly reached Mars. He turned the laptop toward me. Know what that means? We've been trying for longer than we think. Worse. The pattern exists outside linear time. It sees all possible attempts to reach Mars, all possible timelines where humans develop spaceflight, and it ensures the same result every time. You land. You find the graves. You realize you're trapped. You die. You become another grave for the next iteration. Infinite regression, like Herschel said. But not in time. In probability. I felt sick. The whiskey wasn't helping. So what? We just give up. Let it kill whoever it wants. Your father's mistake was thinking he could protect you by staying ignorant. My mistake was thinking the same thing. But here's what they didn't show him in 1994, what they don't tell anyone. Brennan pulled up another file, this one full of equations and graphs I couldn't pass. The pattern has a source, a point of origin. Herschel found it in 1965, 2 years after landing. By then, he'd discovered thousands of graves, mapped the entire distribution. They all radiate from a single location in Valles Marineris, a structure buried under regolith that predates human civilization by millions of years. Alien. Or human from a future so distant we might as well be aliens to them. Doesn't matter. What matters is that Herschel got close to it, started digging. The moment he exposed the structure, something changed. He stopped aging, stopped needing food, water, air, became locked in a single moment, preserved, unable to die or leave or do anything except watch more versions of himself arrive and discover their graves. The room felt too small suddenly. You're saying this thing, this structure, it's keeping him alive. It's keeping him aware, conscious, trapped in eternal recursion. That's the real horror. The death dates on the graves are mercy compared to what happens if you actually reach the source. Brennan's hands were shaking worse than mine now. Your father figured that out in '94, realized that dying on schedule was the better option than surviving to become part of the pattern. There has to be a way to stop it. There is. One way. Herschel found it, sent the data in a burst transmission in 1987. NASA buried it immediately, but I kept a copy. He pulled a flash drive from his pocket, held it like it might explode. The pattern maintains itself through quantum entanglement. Every grave, every death, every anchor point is connected. Break enough anchors simultaneously, and the whole structure collapses. But here's the thing, you can't break your own anchor. The pattern won't let you. You need someone else, someone not tagged by the system, to disrupt the quantum state. Someone without a grave. Someone who was never supposed to be involved. He set the flash drive on the table between us. This contains coordinates, not for Mars, for the source of the Earth-side entanglement. There's a facility in Nevada, the same place they showed your father the video. It houses a quantum receiver that's been locked onto the Mars structure since 1963. Every grave date gets processed through there. Every anchor point is maintained by that connection. You want me to destroy it? I want you to understand what you're choosing. If you break the receiver, you sever Earth's connection to the pattern. Anyone who hasn't already been shown their grave gets freed. Future deaths stop being certain. The timeline opens up. But... He paused, and I saw something like grief cross his face. Everyone who's already locked in stays locked in. Your father still dies in 2019. Your mother still dies in 2003. And you still die tomorrow, November 9th, because you've already seen your grave. The pattern already has you. But everyone else gets saved, including the 3 astronauts still conscious on Mars. The entanglement breaks, they might finally be able to die properly. End the loop, or at least stop being aware of it. He pushed the flash drive toward me. Your father couldn't make this choice because his anchor was tied to your mother's. Breaking the receiver would have killed her immediately, collapsed her probability. He chose to let the pattern continue rather than sacrifice her. Then she died anyway, and he spent 15 years knowing he'd made the wrong choice. I picked up the flash drive. It was warm from his pocket, felt heavier than it should. How do I get in? You don't. The facility is designed to prevent exactly what you're planning. Armed guards, biometric locks, the whole thing. But there's a weakness. They designed it before digital security became sophisticated. The quantum receiver connects to an old computer system, isolated network, runs on protocols from the 70s. He pulled out a diagram, showed me access points and security gaps. You'd need physical access to a terminal inside the building. Could do it with a virus on that drive, old-fashioned backdoor exploit. 30 seconds connected and the whole system crashes. And I die doing it. You die tomorrow regardless. Question is whether you die accomplishing something or die waiting for your heart to give out. Brennan stood up, walked to the window. Outside, the desert was turning orange with late afternoon light. I'm 83. I saw my grave in 1996, dated 2028. I've got time. You don't. So I'll tell you what I should have told your father. Sometimes the heroic choice and the futile choice look exactly the same. You need to decide which one you're making. I pocketed the flash drive and stood up. My father had chosen compliance, had chosen those extra years with me. They hadn't saved him, hadn't saved my mother, hadn't saved anyone. The facility in Nevada. How far? Brennan smiled, but it was sad. 4 hours if you drive fast. Security change shift at midnight. That's your window. Then I'd better get moving. He walked me to the door, paused with his hand on the handle. Your father was a good man. Better than me. He tried to protect you and failed. Now you're trying to protect everyone else. Maybe that's what the pattern really wanted all along, someone stupid enough to fight back. Or maybe, I said, the pattern finally made a mistake by showing me my grave. I drove back toward Barstow with the sunset bleeding across the desert and less than 8 hours until midnight. Less than 30 hours until November 9th. Until my heart stopped or my car crashed or some random probability collapsed and made me dead exactly when I was supposed to be. But I had a flash drive full of code and coordinates for a quantum receiver that had been maintaining impossible deaths for 60 years. If I was going to die tomorrow, I'd at least make sure nobody else had to see their name carved in Martian rock. The facility didn't look like it housed the mechanism for enforcing cosmic death. It looked like a water treatment plant, squat concrete buildings surrounded by chain-link fence, somewhere off Highway 95 between nowhere and nothing. No signs, no identification, just a service road that ended at a guard shack with 2 bored-looking men in rent-a-cop uniforms. I'd parked 3 miles back and hiked in through the desert, arriving at the perimeter just after 11:30 p.m. The fence was old, 12 feet of rusted chain link topped with barbed wire that hadn't been maintained in years. Brennan's information suggested the real security was inside. Pressure sensors, cameras, biometric locks on anything that mattered. But at midnight during shift change, there'd be a 7-minute window when the monitoring station was understaffed. 7 minutes to get in, find a terminal, upload the virus, and collapse 60 years of quantum certainty. I checked my phone, 11:47. The flash drive was in my front pocket, warm against my chest. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Somewhere 70 million kilometers away, a grave with my name on it was waiting for tomorrow. In 14 hours, I'd be dead. Heart attack, probably. Just like my father. Clean, quick. The pattern's preferred method for anchor points it wanted resolved quietly. Unless I broke the receiver first. At 11:58, lights came on in the main building. I watched 3 guards exit, heading toward the parking lot. The shift change. 2 minutes early, which was either luck or the pattern trying to close the window before I could use it. I cut through the fence where it sagged lowest, squeezed through the gap and ran for the nearest building. The desert air was cold and tasted like dust. Motion sensors should have caught me, but they didn't. Either Brennan's information was better than I'd hoped, or the pattern wanted me inside. Neither option was comforting. The door to Building C was locked with a keypad. Brennan had given me a code stolen from maintenance records in 1997. It probably shouldn't have still worked. It did. The door clicked open and I stepped into fluorescent lighting and the smell of old electronics. The corridor stretched ahead, concrete walls painted institutional beige, doors marked with numbers and outdated security classifications. No one in sight. The monitoring station should be on the second floor, but the quantum receiver was in the basement, in a room that officially didn't exist on any schematic. I found the stairwell and went down. The basement was colder, darker, lit by emergency strips that gave everything a sickly green tint. Water dripped somewhere, echoing off concrete. The doors down here were older, heavier, the kind with mechanical locks instead of electronic ones. At the end of the corridor, I found what I was looking for. A door marked Substation 7, with a lock that looked older than I was. Brennan had given me a key. "It'll work," he'd said, "because the pattern wants you to reach the receiver. It just doesn't want you to succeed." The key turned, the door opened. Inside was a room that felt like walking into 1963. Old computer equipment, reel-to-reel tape machines, oscilloscopes with round green screens, all of it still running, still humming with power. The quantum receiver sat in the center on a raised platform, a spherical mass of coiled wire and crystalline structures, pulsing with light that hurt to look at directly. Not glowing, something else. Like reality was bending around it, folding inward to a point that shouldn't exist. I pulled out the flash drive, found the access terminal, an ancient keyboard connected to a monitor that was displaying strings of numbers in constant flux. Dates, coordinates, names. I saw mine scroll past. Thomas Dalton. November 9th, 2025. Coordinates for a location in Barstow. My house, bedroom, heart failure, 3:17 a.m. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the drive. "Don't!" The voice came from behind me. I spun around. Martin Cross stood in the doorway holding a pistol that looked very real and pointed very specifically at my chest. He wasn't wearing his Goldstone uniform anymore. Just dark clothes, tactical gear, the outfit of someone who'd done this before. "Step away from the terminal, Tom. You're part of this." I've been part of this since 1989. Recruited the same way everyone gets recruited. They showed me my grave, showed me I had 30 years, offered me a job maintaining the system. Better than dying, I thought. Better than knowing and being helpless. He stepped into the room, keeping the gun trained on me. "Your father almost made it here in 1994. Got as far as the fence before I intercepted him. Convinced him to take the deal, told him he'd be protecting you. He died anyway. We all die. The pattern just tells us when." Martin's finger was tight on the trigger. "You upload that virus, the receiver collapses. Everyone locked in still dies on schedule, but the system breaks. No more new anchors, no more control. You think that's a victory? You think NASA wants to lose the one tool they have for managing probability?" "Managing?" The word came out like gravel. "You mean murdering? My mother wasn't supposed to die in 2003. The pattern killed her to keep my father compliant." "Your mother was going to die in 2003 regardless. Car accident, black ice. The pattern didn't cause it. It just identified the probability and fixed it in place, made it certain instead of likely. That's what the receiver does. Takes tragic randomness and gives it structure, purpose. That's insane. That's control." He moved closer, the gun never wavering. "Do you know how many lives the pattern has saved? Every time we identify a catastrophic probability, nuclear war, pandemic outbreak, asteroid impact, we can anchor the prevention, make survival certain. The cost is a few thousand anchors scattered across decades, individual deaths that were going to happen anyway, just made predictable. It's the greatest good for the greatest number. I looked at the terminal, at my name still scrolling through the display. I'm going to die tomorrow no matter what I do. Yes. Then what do you care if I break the receiver? Because of what happens after. Martin's voice dropped. The pattern isn't just on Earth. Herschel found the source on Mars, but there are others. Venus, Europa, Titan. Everywhere humans might eventually reach, the pattern is already there, already establishing anchors. You break the Earth receiver. You sever our connection. We lose our window into the system. And eventually, when we do reach those places physically, the pattern will be waiting without us having any way to anticipate or manage it. So I should just let it kill me. Let it keep killing everyone whose name it decides to carve in rock. I'm saying you should understand the choice you're making. The pattern doesn't care about individuals. It cares about certainty. Break the receiver and you introduce chaos back into the system. People will die who weren't supposed to. Timelines will fracture. Probability cascades. He raised the gun slightly. Step away from the terminal. Last warning. I looked at the flash drive in my hand, looked at the receiver, pulsing with impossible light. Looked at Martin and his gun and his 35 years of compliance. My father made the wrong choice, I said, and jammed the drive into the terminal. The gunshot was incredibly loud in the enclosed space. Pain exploded through my left shoulder, spinning me around. I hit the floor, blood spreading hot across my shirt, but my hand was still on the keyboard. I pressed enter. The virus uploaded faster than it should have. The screen flashed red, then black, then filled with cascading errors. The receiver made a sound like breaking glass, stretched into eternity. Martin was screaming something, but I couldn't hear over the noise the receiver was making. The light around it intensified, bent, reality folding inward like a collapsing star. The temperature in the room dropped 30 degrees in seconds. Frost formed on the equipment, on the walls, on Martin's gun hand. He pulled the trigger again, but the bullet stopped mid-air, frozen in a probability that suddenly had too many options. The receiver shattered. Not physically, it was still there, still intact, but something fundamental broke inside it, some quantum state that had been holding for 60 years. The light died, the humming stopped. Every screen in the room went dark. For a moment, there was perfect silence. Then the date started changing. On the dead monitors, ghost images appeared. The display had burned them into the screens over decades. Names and dates, thousands of them, all locked in certainty. Thomas Dalton, November 9th, 2025. But even as I watched, my date flickered, shifted. November 9th became November 10th, then November 15th, then blank, uncertain, open. Martin was on his knees, staring at his hands. What did you do? What did you... He looked at me with eyes full of horror. I saw my date. 2024. Next year. I had time. I had... His breath came in short gasps. His face went grey. He collapsed before I could respond, clutching his chest, the gun clattering across the floor. I watched him die in real time. The same heart attack that should have taken him next year happening right now. Probability collapsing into the nearest available option. The pattern didn't let go gently. I dragged myself to my feet, my shoulder screaming. The bullet had gone through clean, which was lucky, or maybe inevitable. Around me, the basement was silent except for the drip of water and the crackle of dying electronics. I'd done it, broken the receiver, severed Earth's connection to the pattern. But Martin's corpse on the floor reminded me that breaking the system didn't mean escaping it. Everyone already locked in would still die, just not on schedule, not with certainty. The pattern would scramble to enforce its remaining anchors, collapsing probabilities wherever it could, killing people earlier or later or randomly, desperate to maintain structure as the quantum entanglement fell apart. How many people had just had their dates moved up? How many Martin Crosses were dying right now, their hearts stopping because the pattern was fighting back? I stumbled toward the exit, leaving bloody handprints on the walls. The facility alarms should have been screaming, but everything was dead. The virus had spread farther than the receiver, crashing every connected system, erasing records, deleting anchors from every database. Outside, the desert night was painfully clear. Stars overhead, cold wind, the taste of blood in my mouth. I could hear sirens in the distance getting closer. Someone had noticed the facility go dark. I didn't have much time. My phone buzzed. Text from Brennan. It worked. I can see the cascade from here. Every anchor on Mars is breaking. Herschel's transmission just came through. He says thank you. Says he can finally close his eyes. Says dash, quote. The message cut off. I tried calling back. No answer. Brennan's date had been 2028, 4 years away. But the pattern was dying now, lashing out, and he'd been connected to it longer than anyone. Longer even than Martin. I leaned against my truck, dizzy from blood loss, watching the facility in my rearview mirror as I drove away. Emergency vehicles were arriving, converging on a building that officially didn't exist to investigate a system that officially wasn't there. By morning, they'd find Martin's body and a shattered quantum receiver and no explanation for any of it. By morning, I should be dead. But November 9th was coming, and for the first time in 60 years, nobody knew for certain what would happen when it arrived. I made it to a gas station outside Tonopah before the adrenaline wore off and the pain became unbearable. The bathroom was filthy, mirror cracked, but I could see the wound clearly enough. Through and through, like I'd thought. The bullet had missed anything vital, but I was still losing blood, the entire left side of my shirt dark and sticky. I used the first aid kit from my truck, the one my father had insisted I keep stocked. Gauze, medical tape, antiseptic that burned like hell. My hands shook as I packed the wound, front and back, wrapped it tight enough to slow the bleeding. Not good enough for a hospital, but I couldn't risk a hospital. Gunshot wounds meant police reports, questions I couldn't answer. The face in the mirror looked like a stranger, pale, hollow-eyed, speckled with blood. I was 34 years old and I'd just killed a man. Not directly, but close enough. Martin would have lived until 2024 if I hadn't broken the receiver. The pattern had scrambled his anchor, pulled him into the nearest probability, dead on the floor of a basement that officially didn't exist. How many others had died in the last hour? How many anchors had the pattern collapsed in its death throes? I splashed water on my face and went back to the truck. My phone showed 1:47 a.m., November 9th, the day I was supposed to die. But the date on my grave had flickered, changed, gone uncertain. Maybe I had hours, maybe I had decades, or maybe I had minutes and my heart would stop the moment I let my guard down. I drove north on Highway 95, no destination in mind, just movement. The desert stretched black and empty under a sky full of stars that suddenly felt less distant. Mars was up there somewhere, red and cold, covered in graves that maybe, if Brennan was right, were finally at peace. My phone rang, unknown number. I almost didn't answer, expecting more government threats or pattern enforcers coming to finish what Martin started. Tom? The voice was weak, crackling with static, but I recognized it. Brennan. You're still alive. You sound terrible. I'm dying. He said it matter of fact, like commenting on the weather. Patterns fighting back. My anchor was 2028, but it moved to tonight. Started feeling it around 1:30. Chest tight, can't breathe right. Got maybe an hour. Get to a hospital. Wouldn't help. This isn't medical, it's probability catching up. He coughed, wet and painful. Listen. Herschel got a message through before the receiver died. Full transmission, first clear signal in 60 years. NASA's going to bury it, so I'm sending you the file. You need to hear what he said. Brennan, just listen. Please, I don't have time for argument. His voice was fading. The pattern isn't dead, Tom. You wounded it, broke the Earth anchor, but the source is still on Mars. Still broadcasting, still trying to establish new connections. As long as that structure exists, it'll eventually rebuild. Maybe not in our lifetime, but it'll come back. I thought breaking the receiver... You bought time. Maybe decades, maybe centuries. But there's only one way to kill it permanently. Someone has to reach the source. Physically. Destroy it at the point of origin. He coughed again, longer. Herschel figured it out. Spent 60 years studying that thing, learning how it works. He found the shutdown sequence, but he can't execute it himself. He's locked in temporal stasis, can't interact with physical matter anymore. He needs someone else, someone from outside the pattern. I can't get to Mars. Even if I had money for a private launch, it'd take months. NASA's planning a mission, crew of 4 launching in 6 days. Artemis 7. They're calling it a Mars sample return, but it's really a cleanup operation, going to Valles Marineris to investigate what Perseverance found, the graves, the anomalies. They'll land right on top of the source structure. Brennan's breath was coming in short gasps now. The file I'm sending you has Herschel's shutdown sequence and the crew manifest. One of those astronauts is compromised. Patton got to him, showed him his grave, made him an anchor. He's going to sabotage the mission, make sure nobody reaches the source. Which astronaut? File will tell you, but Tom, you need to stop him. Contact NASA, warn them, do whatever it takes. If that mission fails, if they don't destroy the source, everything you did tonight was just delaying the inevitable. My phone buzzed with an incoming file transfer, large, taking time to download over the spotty desert connection. Why me? I asked. Why not just send this to NASA yourself? Because I'm dead in 40 minutes and you're the only person alive who's seen the pattern up close and isn't locked into it anymore. Your anchor broke when the receiver shattered. You're free. Variable. The one person who can move against the pattern without it seeing you coming. His voice was barely a whisper now. Your father couldn't do this. Couldn't make the hard choices. But you can. You already did. Just need to finish it. Brennan, one more thing. He was crying, I realized. I could hear it through the static. Tell them I'm sorry. The astronauts. Herschel and his crew. Tell them I knew about them for 40 years and did nothing. Chose safety over courage. Tell them... His breath caught. Long silence. Then, tell them they're free now. Because of you. The line went dead. I pulled over to the shoulder, hands tight on the wheel, trying to breathe. The file had finished downloading. I opened it. The first document was a transcript of Herschel's transmission, time-stamped 1:23 a.m., just after the receiver collapsed. His words were calm, measured, the voice of a man who'd had 60 years to prepare this message. To whoever broke the anchor, thank you. I've been conscious here since 1963, watching infinite versions of myself arrive and die and arrive again. The pattern kept me alive because it needed an observer, someone to validate the recursion. But now I feel it loosening. The temporal lock is breaking. I can close my eyes for the first time in 62 years. Before I do, you need to know the source structure is still active. Coordinates 14.2 degrees south, 302.1 degrees west, buried 40 meters below the canyon floor. It's not alien, it's human. From approximately 8 million years in our future. They built it as a probability anchor to ensure their timeline remains stable. Every grave on Mars is a fixed point maintaining causality across deep time. I've learned the shutdown sequence. Specific harmonic frequency applied to the crystalline matrix at the structure's core. But I can't do it, I'm no longer solid matter. You'll need someone physical, someone the pattern hasn't locked yet. Artemis 7 is coming, 6 days, but one of the crew is compromised. The pattern showed him his grave before launch authorization. He's carrying an anchor now. He'll sabotage the mission to protect the structure, ensure it keeps broadcasting. You must identify him, stop him. His name is... The transcript cut off. Corrupted data, the rest unreadable. Damn it. Brennan had said the file would identify the compromised astronaut, but this section was destroyed. Maybe damage from the receiver collapse, maybe deliberate sabotage by the pattern's last defenders. I scrolled to the crew manifest. 4 names: Captain Derek Howell, Mission Commander Dr. James Kelso, geologist; Robert Strand, Flight Engineer Lieutenant Alex Griffin, pilot. One of them was an anchor, one of them would kill the mission rather than let the source be destroyed. I had 6 days to figure out which one. My shoulder throbbed, the makeshift bandage already soaking through. I was wanted for breaking into a federal facility, probably wanted for Martin's death once they found his body. The government would be looking for me, and whatever remained of the Patton's human defenders would want me dead. But I had Herschel's shutdown sequence, had the coordinates, had 6 days before 4 men launched toward Mars, and one of them was guaranteed to fail. I pulled out my phone and started composing an email to NASA's administrator. Anonymous, routed through encryption, but detailed enough that they'd have to take it seriously. The graves, the Patton, the compromised astronaut, the shutdown sequence, they wouldn't believe me. But maybe they'd investigate, maybe they'd delay the launch, run psych evaluations, check the crew for anomalies. Or maybe they'd ignore it completely and 4 men would land on Mars to discover their graves waiting, just like Herschel had. I hit send and started driving again. Toward California, toward Goldstone, toward whatever came next. My father had spent 25 years knowing his death date, living in certainty. I'd broken that certainty, opened probability back up, and the cost had been blood and bodies and Martin's corpse staring at the ceiling in a basement full of broken dreams. But I was still alive. November 9th was here, and I was breathing, thinking, moving, free. The sun rose over the desert, turning everything gold. My phone buzzed with a response from NASA. Automated rejection, classified information protocols, investigation of threatening communications. They weren't going to help, which meant I had 6 days to figure out how to stop a compromised astronaut from sabotaging humanity's last chance to kill the Patton at its source. 6 days to finish what Herschel started, what my father couldn't do, what Brennan died helping me accomplish. I thought about turning around, going home, disappearing into normal life and letting NASA handle their own problems. But there was a structure on Mars, 8 million years old, maintaining probability anchors across time itself. And somewhere in the Mojave Desert, my father's ashes were scattered near Goldstone, near the place where he'd given up rather than face what needed to be done. I wasn't going to make his mistake. I stopped at a diner outside Barstow, ordered coffee and breakfast I couldn't taste, and started making plans to infiltrate a space program I had no authorization to access, to identify a man carrying a quantum death sentence, and to somehow convince NASA that their Mars mission was going to fail unless I, a wanted fugitive with a gunshot wound, was allowed to intervene. 6 days. The Patton might be wounded, but it was still fighting, and it had a 62-year head start on learning how to win. I reached Kennedy Space Center on November 13th with 48 hours until launch and a fake press credential that cost me $3,000 from a forger in Miami. The shoulder wound had stopped bleeding, but infection was setting in, fever, chills, the kind of pain that made thinking difficult. Didn't matter, I had 2 days. Getting access to the astronaut crew was impossible through official channels. They were in quarantine protocols, isolated from everyone except mission-critical personnel. But I'd learned something from my father's files. The Artemis 7 crew had requested a final meeting with families before launch, scheduled for tomorrow morning in the crew quarters observation room. I just needed to get one of the families to bring me in. Captain Derek Howell's wife was my target. Social media showed she'd been posting anxiously about the mission, worried about the unexplained technical delays that had pushed launch back twice already. The Patton's influence, probably. Howell's file showed he'd been an Air Force pilot for 12 years, 2 previous space missions, no red flags. But files didn't show quantum anchors. I waited outside her hotel at dawn, looking like hell, unshaved, pale, wearing clothes I'd bought at a truck stop. When she emerged heading for her morning run, I stepped into her path. "Mrs. Howell, I need 60 seconds of your time. It's about your husband's mission." She tried to move past me. "I don't talk to press." "I'm not press. I'm the person who broke into a federal facility 5 days ago and destroyed a quantum probability receiver that's been killing people since 1963. I pulled out my phone, showed her the photos from my father's files. The graves, the crew, the Mars surface. One of the 4 men launching in 2 days is going to sabotage the mission. I need your help to figure out which one." She stared at me like I was insane. "Fair assessment." "Please," I said, "I know how this sounds, but your husband is going to land on Mars and find graves with his crew's names on them. If I'm wrong, you lose nothing. If I'm right and you don't help, He dies up there knowing there was no rescue coming." Something in her expression shifted. Fear, maybe. Or recognition. "You're Thomas Dalton. They've been looking for you. FBI, NASA, security, everyone." "I know. They said you killed a man in Nevada. Said you're dangerous, delusional." "I did kill a man. And I am dangerous, but I'm not delusional." I met her eyes. "Your husband has been having nightmares. Dreams about Mars, about graves, about dying alone. He hasn't told you because he thinks it's just stress. But it's not stress, it's the pattern bleeding through. And if we don't stop it, his dreams become reality." Her hand was shaking. "How do you know about his dreams?" "Because my father had the same ones before he died. Because everyone the pattern touches starts seeing their death before it happens." I lowered my voice. "Please, I need to meet your husband. Need to meet all 4 crew members. I can identify who's compromised, but only if I can see them, talk to them." She looked at me for a long moment. Then, "The family meeting is at 9. Building 7, crew quarters. I can get you in as my brother, but if you're lying, if you do anything to hurt Derek..." "If I'm lying, I'm just a crazy person who'll be arrested before lunch. If I'm right, I save your husband's life." She nodded slowly. 9 a.m. Don't make me regret this." The crew quarters were sterile and uncomfortable, designed for function over comfort. The observation room had one-way glass separating families from the astronauts, but for this meeting they'd opened the partition. 4 men in flight suits, looking tired but determined. Their families clustered around them. Wives, kids, parents, all trying to pretend this was just another deployment. Mrs. Howell introduced me as her brother Alex. Nobody questioned it in the chaos of goodbyes. I shook hands with each astronaut, looking for something, anything that would identify the compromised one. Captain Derek Howell had a firm grip, steady eyes. "Appreciate you coming, Alex." Means a lot to Sarah. Dr. James Kelso was distracted, kept glancing at his tablet. "Sorry, just reviewing some last-minute geological survey data. You know how it is." Robert Strand barely looked at me, focused entirely on his 2 daughters. "Make sure Mum knows I love her, okay? Tell her every day." Lieutenant Alex Griffin was the youngest, nervous energy. Couldn't stand still. "First mission. Can you believe it? Going to Mars. Actually going to Mars." I watched them interact with their families, searching for tells. Which one had seen his grave? Which one was carrying an anchor that would destroy the mission? They all looked normal, scared, excited, human. I was running out of time. "Captain Howell," I said, loud enough to cut through the conversations. "Can I ask you something about the mission timeline?" He turned, confused. "Timeline? Are you a reporter or..." "When you land in Valles Marineris, you're scheduled to deploy the drill package on day 3. 40 meters down, specific coordinates. 14.2 degrees south, 302.1 degrees west." I watched his face. Why that exact location? His expression didn't change. "Geological interest. Ancient water ice deposits, they think." "Why?" I turned to Kelso. "Doctor, you're the geologist. Those coordinates, you picked them." Kelso looked uncomfortable. The site was selected by committee, multiple data sources, orbital surveys. "But you advocated for it specifically, pushed it through despite objections from 3 other geologists who thought the site was too risky." I was making this up, gambling on his reaction. "Why?" "I don't know what you're talking about." But his hand was shaking, subtle, but there. Strand stood up. "Who the hell is this guy, Sarah?" "Someone asking the wrong damn questions," Griffin added, moving toward me. I pulled out my phone, showed them the photo of the graves. All 4 names. Howell, Kelso, Strand, Griffin. Death dates in 1963. This photo was taken during the first manned Mars landing, November 1963, a classified mission that found graves with the crew's names on them, your names, all of you. I looked at each of them. One of you knows about this. One of you has seen his own grave, knows what's buried at those coordinates, and is going to make sure this mission fails rather than let that structure be destroyed. Silence. Absolute silence. Then Kelso laughed. Not a normal laugh. Something broken. "You're insane! Security!" He was reaching for the call button when Strand grabbed his arm. "Don't." Strand's voice was quiet. He's not wrong. Everyone turned to look at him. His daughters were crying now, sensing something terrible. "I saw it 3 months ago," Strand continued, "during final training. Had a seizure, coded on the table, technically dead for 90 seconds. When I came back I remembered things. Mars, graves. My own name carved in rock dated 1963. Thought it was just near-death hallucination until they started appearing in my dreams. Every night. The same graves, the same coordinates, the same message. Don't let them reach the structure." "Jesus Christ, Bobby," Howell breathed. "I'm sorry." Strand was crying. I tried to ignore it, tried to tell myself it was just trauma. But then the mission kept getting delayed. Technical problems that didn't make sense. Equipment failures at the last minute. I realized something was trying to stop us from launching, and I think... He looked at me. I think part of me was helping it. Sabotaging things without realizing. Because whatever's at those coordinates, it doesn't want to be found. "It's a probability anchor," I said. "A structure from 8 million years in the future, maintaining stable causality. The graves are just symptoms. If you reach it, if you destroy it, you break the pattern that's been killing people for 60 years. But the pattern knows. It showed you your grave to make you an anchor, locked you into protecting the source." "Then the mission's doomed," Kelso's voice was hollow. "If Bobby's compromised, if he's going to sabotage..." "No," I cut him off. "He told us." "That's the difference. The pattern works through secrecy, through people thinking they're alone. But he told us, which means he's fighting it." I looked at Strand. "You're going to have impulses. Urges to damage equipment, to alter trajectories, to prevent the mission from succeeding. When you feel them coming, you tell your crew, every time, out loud, don't fight alone." "And if I can't stop myself?" I pulled out the last thing Brennan had sent me, a single-use neural suppressor, experimental tech designed for astronauts with seizure disorders. "This goes on your temple. If your brain activity shows patterns consistent with external influence, it delivers a targeted pulse, disrupts the signal. You'll be conscious but unable to act on compulsions for about 60 seconds, long enough for your crew to restrain you if necessary. You want us to take a compromised crew member to Mars." Howell was looking at me like I'd suggested flying blindfolded. "I want you to take someone who's aware he's compromised. Someone fighting back. The alternative is scrubbing the mission, and the pattern just tries again with the next crew, the next mission. This might be humanity's only shot at destroying the source before it rebuilds." Griffin was shaking his head. "This is insane. We should report this, delay the launch. The pattern has people inside NASA, inside government. Anyone you report to might be defending it." I met each of their eyes. "Launch in 2 days, land at those coordinates, deploy Herschel's shutdown sequence that I'm going to give you. If Strand tries to stop you, knock him unconscious. But destroy that structure. End this." Security burst through the door before anyone could respond. 6 men, weapons drawn, shouting for me to get on the ground. Mrs. Howell was screaming that I'd threatened them, that she'd made a mistake. The astronauts were being pulled back, the families ushered out. I hit the ground hard, hands behind my head. Before they cuffed me, I made eye contact with Strand one last time. "Tell them," I said, "every impulse, every urge, don't fight alone." They dragged me out. The last thing I saw was Strand nodding slowly, the neural suppressor clutched in his hand, his daughters crying as security separated them. I'd done what I could, given them the tools, the knowledge, the warning. Now it was up to 4 men and a compromised astronaut fighting his own brain to finish what had started in 1963. 2 days until launch. 8 months until Mars landing. 8 months until they either destroyed the source or died trying. I was thrown into a holding cell in the NASA security building, alone with my fever and my infected wound and the knowledge that I'd just bet humanity's future on a man who'd seen his own grave. Outside somewhere, the pattern was watching, waiting. And on Mars, William Herschel was finally sleeping after 62 years, dreaming of the day someone would come to finish his work. Or die trying. They released me on August 3rd, 2026, 9 months after I broke into that Nevada facility. No trial, no charges, just a quiet dismissal of everything with a federal gag order and a monthly check that would continue until I died. Hush money, compliance payment. Whatever you wanted to call it. The Artemis 7 crew had landed on Mars 2 weeks earlier. I'd watched the broadcast from my cell, the grainy video of 4 men stepping onto rust-coloured ground, Strand looking pale but determined as he deployed the drill package at coordinates 14.2 south, 302.1 west. The news called it a routine geological survey. Nobody mentioned graves. Nobody mentioned the structure they'd found 40 meters down, the crystalline matrix that Herschel had studied for 62 years. Nobody mentioned Robert Strand collapsing twice during the descent, his neural suppressor firing as the pattern tried to force him to destroy the drill. But I'd received one message, routed through so many encryption layers it took me 3 days to decode. From Howell. 4 words. We finished his work. The structure was destroyed, the pattern's source, the Mars anchor that had been maintaining causality for 8 million years, collapsed into quantum uncertainty. I moved to Portland, far from deserts and space facilities. Got a job doing network security for a tech company that didn't ask too many questions about my resume gap. Lived in a tiny apartment overlooking the river and tried very hard not to think about Mars or graves or my father's ashes scattered near Goldstone. But 3 nights ago I woke up at 3:17 a.m., the exact time my grave had said I'd die back in November, with my phone ringing. Unknown number. I answered because answering had become a habit. Tom, the voice was familiar but impossible. It's Bobby. Bobby Strand. My mouth went dry. You're on Mars, 8-month communication delay, you can't... I'm not calling from Mars. He sounded exhausted. I'm calling from Goldstone. We landed yesterday. Early return. Classified. They didn't announce it because of what we found. The structure's destroyed, Howell said. The structure's destroyed. But before it collapsed, we downloaded its memory core. Tom, it wasn't maintaining anchors, it was preventing them. The graves on Mars, all those death dates, they weren't enforced probabilities. They were warnings. I sat up, sudden clarity cutting through the confusion. Warnings about what? About the timeline that results if humans reach deep space without understanding causality management. The structure was built by our descendants 8 million years from now, after they'd mastered time travel. They looked back at every possible branching path humanity could take and found one constant. If we expand into the universe while still thinking death is random, we create cascading paradoxes that eventually collapse all of reality. That doesn't make sense. The pattern killed people. My mother, my father. Your mother's death was always going to happen. Car accident, 2003. But the pattern made sure you and your father knew about it in advance. Not to punish you, to teach you that death has meaning, structure, consequence. Strand's voice cracked. The graves were never about enforcement. They were lessons, showing us that every action ripples through time, that free will and determinism have to balance, or everything breaks. Then why did people die when I broke the receiver? Because you introduced chaos into a finely tuned system. Martin, Brennan, all the anchors that collapsed. They were always going to die eventually. You just removed the certainty, let probability scatter them randomly instead of scheduled. You didn't kill them. You made their deaths meaningless. I couldn't breathe. What are you saying? I'm saying we destroyed the only thing protecting reality from human chaos. And now we need to rebuild it. From scratch. Using what we learned from the Mars structure. His voice dropped to a whisper. Tom, your name is on the Artemis 9 crew manifest. Launch in 6 months. They need someone who understands the pattern, who's interfaced with it, someone whose anchor broke and reformed, someone who can help us build a new probability structure before the cascading paradoxes start. I'm not an astronaut. You're something better. You're someone who died on schedule and lived anyway. That makes you temporally flexible, quantum variable, the only person who can navigate between certainty and chaos without breaking. Outside my window, Portland was waking up. Normal people going to normal jobs, living normal lives. I'd fought so hard to join them. There are more graves out there, Strand continued quietly. Jupiter's moons, Saturn's rings, places we haven't reached yet. All of them showing us death dates we haven't earned. The pattern was teaching us to respect causality before we spread it across the solar system. We need to learn that lesson, or everything our descendants built crumbles backward through time. And if I refuse? Then in 8 million years, humans will look back at this moment and realize we were given a choice. Build our own pattern, or let chaos devour us. We'll see which path we chose. He hung up. I sat in the dark of my apartment, phone still pressed to my ear, thinking about my father and his 25 years of certainty. About Herschel sleeping peacefully after 62 years of witnessing infinite recursion. About graves on Mars that were never tombs but textbooks. About the crew manifest with my name on it. About a launch in 6 months that would teach me to become the anchor I'd spent 9 months trying to break. My phone buzzed, email from NASA, subject line, Artemis 9 mission briefing. I opened it, read through the technical specifications, the crew assignments, the training schedule. At the bottom, a single line that made everything clear. Mission objective: establish quantum probability framework at Valles Marineris using recovered structure templates. Estimated anchors required, 347. Estimated mission duration, permanent. Permanent. I thought about my father one last time, about the choice he'd made to protect me instead of fighting, about how he'd been wrong and right at the same time. Then I clicked reply and typed 2 words, I accept. Outside, the sun was rising over Portland. In 6 months, it would be rising over a launch pad in Florida, and eventually over Mars, where graves waited to teach the next lesson and the next, until humanity either learned to balance chaos and certainty, or collapsed into neither. The pattern was dead. Long live the pattern. I had 6 months to learn how to become one,